Do you look at your mountain of goals and feel stuck?
Or have you already achieved great things and yet you know there's still more?
Then you've come to the right place.
We're here to offer practical tools and tangible strategies to change your mindset.
And challenge you to produce a life beyond the norm.
I'm Nate.
I'm Laura.
Welcome to the Transcendence Project.
Hey guys, welcome to episode 2 of the Transcendence Project. We're so excited to be diving into the Enneagram this week.
Last week, we talked about self-awareness and some strategies to actually improve our self-awareness. And one of those strategies was that the tools that we can use, the physical tools and assessments that we can take. And like we said last week, one of the biggest ones, but one of the best ones to start with for beginners is the Enneagram. So today we're going to really dive into the Enneagram. What is the Enneagram? Give a brief description of some of the personality types before we start jumping into type by type in future episodes.
Yes, and we definitely want to clarify that we view it as a tool and not as a personality test. And we're going to get into a little bit of why we say that. But at first, you can look at the Enneagram and be a little overwhelmed, and it can be a little complicated to understand. But even though with it being so complex, it's actually pretty simple. So I encourage you, for a visual, you can go on Google search and just look up an Enneagram diagram, and you can see what it looks like for a visual reference. So basically, there are 9 points to represent each 9 personality types, and they are around the circumference of a circle, and they're all connected to each other by the lines on the inside of the circle. So from one perspective, you can view the Enneagram as just simply 9 distinct personality types. And although you might find a little bit of yourself in each number, you're going to have one that stands out the most and that matches you the most. The reason why we like to describe this more as a tool and less like a personality test is because your Enneagram type is not likely to change ever. According to the Enneagram Institute website, everyone emerges from childhood with one of the 9 types dominating their personality, with inborn temperament and other prenatal factors being the main determinants of our type. In other words, most Enneagram experts believe that we are born with our dominant type.
You'll actually be able to start to see this in kids early on. That's how you kind of know that people are born with this type, because it'll help you, once you can determine their type, actually parent them better. Laura and I don't have kids yet, but I can certainly see this in my niece and nephew, even at a young age, at 4 or 5 years old. You can start to decipher exactly what type they are, and it helps you when you're parenting them. Yeah,
your nephew is definitely a type 8 because he challenges his parents quite often. So before we jump into a little description of each types, there's a couple things that I want to point out specifically about the Enneagram. So, like I said, your type will not change from one dominant type to another, and not everything that's described for a specific type will apply to you. A lot of times it will fluctuate depending on if you are in a healthy state, an average state, or an unhealthy state that make up your type. And also, the numerical ranking has no significance. So even though Nate is an 8 and I'm a 6, doesn't mean his number or his type is at greater than mine in any way. This also means that there's no one type that's better than another type. Each type has their own strengths and their own weaknesses. They're going to have their own assets and their own liabilities. So, you might find that you want to be a different number and you might not like your number, but I really encourage you, as you lean in and you take the test and you find out what you are, even if some of those negative parts of it are a little embarrassing, lean into that because you can really maximize not only your strengths, but your weaknesses as well.
And what you want to do with the Enneagram is you actually want to find out those strengths and lean into those strengths and maximize your strengths. And I encourage you that if there is another type that you really like some of their personality traits and you want to maybe become more like them, surround yourself with some friends like that. Yeah,
that's good.
Because they're going to challenge you in that area. Like I talked about last week, choosing friends wisely and creating a feedback-rich environment. It goes hand in hand with the Enneagram. Have all your friends take this, have your family take this. So that way, 1, you guys can communicate better, but 2, you can pinpoint exactly what you want to be challenged by that person.
Something that I notice as well is that I tend to surround myself with a lot of 2s. And I don't know if there's any science behind that, but as I had friends that started to take the test and family members that started to take the test as well, there was a common denominator. A lot of them had a similar number. And of course, your family members might all have a different number. But as far as friends go, I have a lot of 2s in my life. And lastly, before I jump into the different types, one thing I want to point out is you should never use the Enneagram as a way to hold it above someone's head for their weaknesses or point out their flaws. It's good to be aware. Maybe if you're in a place of leadership, be aware of the people on your team and, their strengths as well as their weaknesses, but don't tear them down for it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're in a place of, especially in leadership in a work environment, this is a really good tool to have your whole team take and then actually study every type, which in these next couple episodes, we're going to go over every single type in pretty good detail and study every type. That way, the people below you, you know how to coach them, you know how to train them, you know how to lead them properly because everyone's going to process information differently. And this is actually going to help pull the differences out of each person.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, now I want to get into each type and a little description of each. So type 1 is the reformer. Type 2 is the helper. Type 3 is the achiever. Type 4 is the individualist. Type 5 is the investigator. Type 6 is the loyalist. Type 7 is the enthusiast. Type 8 is the challenger. And lastly, 9 is the peacemaker. So for type 1s, they're going to be principled, purposeful, self-control, and perfectionistic. Type 2s are normally generous, demonstrative, people-pleasing, and possessive. Type 3 is adaptable, excelling, driven, and image-conscious. Type 4 is expressive, dramatic, self-absorbed, and temperamental. Type 5 is perceptive, innovative, secretive, and isolated. Type 6 is engaging, responsible, anxious, and suspicious. Type 7 is spontaneous, versatile, acquisitive, and scattered. Type 8 is self-confident, decisive, willful, and confrontational. And lastly, type 9 is receptive, reassuring, complacent, and resigned.
So all these types, one may stick out to you a little bit more than the others, and that's probably going to be your dominant type. The other thing to keep in mind is that these aren't the gospel. You're not going to resonate with every single trait of your dominant type, because a lot of them fluctuate between the healthy and the unhealthy that Laura spoke about earlier. So the Enneagram does a great job of actually separating out some groups that have some similar characteristics, and they call them either groupings or centers. The first one's going to be the instinctive center or the body group. These are going to be ones that make decisions based off their gut instincts. These are going to be your 1s, your 8s, and your 9s. Whenever they're coming to a decision, it's whatever they feel instinctively, that's what they're going to do. Mm-hmm. Now, the next one's going to be the feeling center. These are going to be your 2s, 3s, and 4s, and they're actually going to make decisions based off of their heart, and they're also known as the heart group. They're going to make decisions based off their emotions, based off their feelings, based off the current situation. The next one's going to be the mind group or the thinking center. These are going to be your 7s, your 6s, and your 5s, and you'll notice they're going to make more decisions based on overthinking and overanalyzing. These are going to be your biggest risk analysis people. These are going to be the people that actually think out a whole process and every outcome before actually doing something. Now, with these same groupings, they actually all have a negative emotion that you would tend to go towards if you're not in a state of joy or creativity. Your negative emotion for the 1s, the 8s, and the 9s is actually going to be anger. You're going to see that when you're not happy, chances are you're angry. Now, all of these types are going to experience anger in a lot different way. The 1s are going to tend to internalize it. Your 9s are going to tend to deny it and act like it's not there, even though it is there. And 8s are going to externalize it. They're going to show you when they're angry. Now, the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s, like we said, the heart or the feeling center, these are going to feel sadness or shame a lot more. Again, they all experience it differently, where a 3 is also going to deny it, just like a 9. A 2 is going to try to get others to like them, where a 4 is going to try to control it by being proud of being an individual and being different and being unique. And they're going to try to control that shame by putting it in, I'm different, instead of just saying, I feel out of place or I feel sad. The thinking center, their negative emotion that they tend to go to is fear or anxiety. They're going to fear the most out of the world. Specifically, 6s tend to fear the most out of everyone. With the 7s, they fear an internal pain more than anything. So they try to avoid anything that could cause either them to cry or somebody else to cry or somebody else to be scared. They tend to try to make light of everything.
Right. They don't like negative emotion, period.
Yeah. Where a 5 is going to be a fear of the outer world and that they're scared that they're not going to be able to cope with it. That's why you see that they are a lot of time isolated.
Yeah.
As you said in the description before. So the Enneagram uses a circle diagram for a reason. They could break it into just 9 columns and 9 lists of exactly, what the different types are. But chances are you're going to fall somewhere on the circle that you're going to be close to your dominant number, but you're not going to be pinpointed just on your dominant number. You're going to lean towards one of those adjacent numbers. So for a 1, your adjacent numbers are going to either be a 2 or a 9, where you're going to exhibit some of the traits of either a 9 or of a 2. They call this your wing. This is going to be your wing type, where you're going to see, I resonate a lot with that other one next to me. Even though it's not my dominant type, it's going to express some of those traits and some of those positives and some of those negatives.
Yeah. So with me being a 6 wing 7 and my brother being a 7 wing 6, there's a lot of common things that I've noticed. And even though I'm 8 years older than him, there's still a lot of similarities between the two of us and how we think compared to my sister, who is a 4.
To truly understand your type and your personality, you're going to have to know your dominant type and your wing type, because there's going to be a lot of coaching, especially for people who have what they call a strong wing, meaning they're almost right in the middle between the two. They just tend to lean towards one just a tad more. Now, there's some of us that are very dominant with our dominant personality trait. I, for one, am very dominant with mine. I only lean towards a 7 just a slight bit, but I'm almost right exactly on an 8. And we'll reference a test to take in the description that's going to tell you exactly how much of your type you are. It's also going to tell you your wing, and it's also going to tell you your subtype.
Yeah.
So there's actually 3 subtypes to every single type. And these 3 subtypes are going to let you know a little bit more of how you work with different people. So the first one's going to be self-preservation. These are going to be people that are more worried about their safety and more worried about preserving their self, and more worried about practical things such as proper sleep, proper diet, money, their job, their security. They want to make sure that their needs are taken care of. Then you're going to have what they call an intimate type or a sexual type. And this is somebody that does really good one-on-one. They don't always mean it as a sexual way of intimacy or physical attraction. They just do good in a one-on-one conversation rather than a large group of people. They're more worried about the actual chemistry or the subconscious connection of people rather than the networking.
Right.
What you're going to see is closely related to that one, because it has to do with other people, is going to be the social subtype. The social subtype are your social butterflies that want to network with as many people and want to know as many people. They're going to do the best in large groups. So these people are going to be the people that are floating around talking to everybody and really trying to build a connection with as many people as possible versus really trying to build a deep connection with 1 or 2. Now, Laura earlier spoke about a healthy versus an average versus an unhealthy and what that means. And this is what you're going to see fluctuate the most. Your type is not going to fluctuate. Your wing most likely will never fluctuate, and your subtype most likely will never fluctuate. Now, to really, like I said, become self-aware, you really need to know all 3. And the test below is going to tell you all 3. And that's why I recommend taking that one. Just a little side note, when you click on the link, there's going to be 2 tests. There's going to say Enneagram Test 1 and Enneagram Test 2. Make sure you take the second one.
And something that I want to point out is there's not a, reason why we're trying to push this exact website to take the test on, but you need to be careful about, not just going on the internet and searching, the first Enneagram test that pops up. This one is going to be really insightful and gives a lot more detail than just, oh, hey, you're a 6 wing 7. It's going to give you all the things that you want to know about your type.
I've had almost everybody in my organization take this test, and I've had multiple family members and friends take this test as well. And we find that this one is the most accurate when it comes to deciphering your dominant, your wing, and your subtype.
And something else I want to point out too, if you feel like you tend to not be quite honest with where you're at, it might be good to have someone that you trust help you take the test, someone that is willing to say, like Nate, for example, I tried to take it the first time and it was not the correct type at all. And we sat down and he helped me, and he even asked me, okay, for this question, it says, I have a bright bright view on every situation. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm pretty optimistic. And he was like, no, you're not.
Now, Laura looks at the worst possible situation and everything.
Right. So without him being there to be accountable and to help me, be honest with, my actual thoughts, I probably would have never gotten a correct result. So I encourage you, if you feel like, on some of these questions, I'm not sure, have someone that you trust help you take the test.
Now back to healthy, average, unhealthy. What does this even mean? You're going to fall on a scale. I think the Enneagram Institute does a great job of showing the different levels as they break down a brief description of what it means to be healthy, what it means to be average, and what it means to be unhealthy. And this is actually going to show you, where you're at with your self-awareness. And as you become more self-aware, this is where you have a clear path and a clear goal of things that you need to work on to stay in a healthy state.
Yep.
And if you read through all the types or listen to these future episodes where we're going to go over what it means to be healthy and what it means to be unhealthy, you're going to see that the healthy types are the people that make the world better. The unhealthy types are the people that make the world worse. And obviously we all want to be those that contribute to the world and make the world a better place and make it better for our friends, our family, for ourselves even. And by doing this self-awareness assessment and by starting this path of personal growth and having this starting point, you're going to see that it's going to be easier for you to contribute more to your life, to your circle of friends, and to the world in general as you take a path to what it means to be healthy.
Mm-hmm. And each type's version of healthy is going to look different. So for example, Nate's version of healthy for his type is going to look completely opposite to my type, just because we both have different strengths. And when we lean into those strengths, they're going to look a lot different. I definitely know when I'm in an unhealthy state, because I tend to shrink back, because fear is one of the biggest struggles of a 6. And I tend to fear a lot of things. And so I know that when I'm in a healthy state, I'm not as fearful. And it's so easy for me to recognize, wow, okay, I'm living in a healthy state. And it's kind of freeing when you can recognize, okay, this is how I live in a healthy state.
And the only way to get to that healthy state is to be open to growth. Like we talked about last week, the best thing that follows self-awareness is self-acceptance. Mm-hmm. The moment you start getting defensive and contracting, you're going to start reverting back to what you're going to see is the low average or the unhealthy state, when you can actually be open to that feedback and wanting to grow and move forward and learn, what are my weaknesses? What are my strengths? And actually accept them. This is me. That's when you're going to start to see you lean more towards the healthy side and just exemplifying your strengths and mitigating your weaknesses.
And the reason why Nate and I are so passionate about the Enneagram is because it is insanely accurate. I mean, every part of it, all the details that it gives for each type is directly in line with those people. Like when we had our family take the test, it was like, wow, okay, that is exactly you. I remember my sister when she took it, and, because it doesn't just, show the good side of your type, it's going to tell you the negative things. I remember her texting me saying, this is embarrassing, because it's like every negative thought or every negative habit that you might have is out for the world to see when you know your type.
But it will increase communication. I feel like this has made our marriage even stronger because we've been able to communicate more clearly to each other. And we all know a lot of things that happen that cause drama or chaos in life is a breakdown of communication.
Right.
And being able to clearly communicate better, being able to coach my team better at work, being able to talk to my friends in a proper way and challenge them and call them out for whenever I see them start to head towards that average state, or commend them when they're starting to head towards that healthy state. This has just opened up so much more opportunity to have those conversations.
Yeah. I don't think there's an area in our life where we don't use the Enneagram as a tool, because everything about it is so true. It's so valuable. All of the knowledge that it can bring to a relationship, a friendship, to a family dynamic or a business. We've just seen how much insight it can bring.
Now, when you guys are looking at the chart, you may get confused a little bit. Hey, why is there lines going across the middle? What do these lines mean? We already described what the circle means. That's where you fall with the personality types. What the lines represent are actually going to represent where you start to head towards when you're in a growth or a healthy state, and where you start to head towards if you're in a stressful or unhealthy state. So your growth one is going to be, you're going to start to exhibit some of the traits of that other type that shows that you are in a healthy state. So a 1, for instance, we'll use this as an example, is a perfectionist. They want everything. They're very rigid, very serious. You'll notice when a 1 is comfortable and when a 1 is in a healthy state, they go towards their growth number, which is actually a 7. So they're going to have more fun. They're going to be more spontaneous. They're going to be a little bit goofier and not as rigid. Mm-hmm. And you'll see this. We see this with Laura's dad a lot. Yeah. When he's at work, he's at work. Mm-hmm. He's serious. But when we're sitting around with the family and having a good time, he's loose. Laughing, he's joking, and he's having a good time. Yeah. And he's definitely in a healthy state of what it means to be a 1. And your stress 1 is going to be the opposite of that. You're going to start to exhibit some of the negative traits of that other type. If you were in stress or if you were under too much pressure, you're going to start to revert back to some of their unhealthy traits. So you're going to start to see some of those unhealthy traits exhibit through. Now, I know we just covered a lot and it seems very overwhelming and very complex, but what I encourage you to do is listen to these next episodes. We're going to go through each type. We're going to spend a whole episode on each type and really break down what that type means, what its strengths are, what is healthy, what is unhealthy, what are your growth, what is your stress, what types are you very compatible with, all the different dynamics, the wings, the subtypes for that type, and really break it down. And what I encourage you to do is learn as much as possible about your type first. Yeah. Then if you're married or have a significant other, learn as much as possible about their type next. Then try to learn the whole thing. Because as you learn your type, you're going to get the grasp of all that it has to offer. And then when you start to learn your spouse's type, that's the person you want to have the clearest communication with in general, because that's your partner for life. And then if you start to listen to all the types, and that's when you can actually take it into your teams at work. Mm-hmm. This is when you can take it into your friends, your family, and just increase your relationships and your coaching at work, your leadership across the board. So in this next week, I encourage you to click that link below and go ahead and take the test before we dive into type 1. I will also say too that as you become more familiar with the Enneagram overall, I know for Nate and I, we've become so familiar with the overall traits of each type that it becomes very easy to predict what someone is going to be. You can almost guarantee that they're going to be the type that you've said from the beginning, because it is pretty simple to understand once you get the hang of it and understand the wings and the subtypes and all of that. Another thing that I want to get into is resources. One of my favorites is the EnneagramInstitute.com. It's going to give you, once you know your type, it's going to give you a lot of insight. You can go to their website and just click learn, and you can click your type. You can read between the relationships between two types and the pitfalls that you might have, the things that you might do really well at together. This was very, very insightful for Nate and I. This described our marriage almost to a T in our relationship, and the cause of most of our disagreements or arguments, it would almost pinpoint the exact cause of it, and we're like, man, this is accurate. Yeah, and to an extent, it has actually helped us not only have better communication skills, but I feel like we know how to have a conversation just between each other, because we understand where both of us are coming from, because we know our types. Nate knows that I'm going to be the one that's going to think it all through and be a little bit hesitant. And I know Nate is the one that's always going to challenge. He loves a good debate. And so I know that being his wife, I'm ready for that whenever he's ready for a debate. Sometimes I'll start a debate just to have a debate. Yeah. It's fun for me, and now Laura knows that it's so annoying. Laura knows that it's fun for me, and she'll play along sometimes just to debate with me. Sometimes. And then lastly, there's two books that I really like that I recently read. The first one is The Road Back to You, An Enneagram Journey to Self-Discovery. It's by Ian Cron. Which he actually has a podcast, right? Yes. Typology. Yes. It's probably one of the, if not the best on really describing more in depth of the Enneagram. So we're going to go through each type, but he actually brings on guests of each type and has conversations with them. And you'll actually be able to see, once you know all the types, you'll actually be able to see a lot of those traits come through in just even general conversation. And by listening to that, it's going to help you decipher other types in your day-to-day life, like I said, which is going to really help with your teams, especially at work.
Yeah. And for me, I don't actually have a lot of 6s in life around me. So when I listen to an episode where he has a 6 on, it's like, oh my gosh, I actually have someone to relate to. It's so accurate. And it's like, wow, I actually feel understood. And then lastly, another book is The Path Between Us, An Enneagram Journey to Healthy Relationships by Suzanne Stable. I think that's how you pronounce her name. But both of those books are really good. I would encourage you to read The Road Back to You first before you read The Path Between Us. Both of those are going to be full of a wealth of knowledge to really understand your number at a new level, because Ian Cron definitely goes into depth with each trait.
Even though the Enneagram's been so recent that it's become very popular in the general public, this test goes back
It's been
centuries.
around forever, yeah.
It's been around for an extremely long time, and now people are just really starting to find out how accurate it is and use it more and more. And ultimately, the goal is to see the perspective of all 9 types, see that everybody has their strengths, and find out how we can all work together.
Yeah.
That's the goal of the Enneagram.
Yep.
Like Laura said earlier, it's not to marginalize anybody or put anybody in a box or condemn anybody for their faults. It's to see how can we work together as a team with all these different personality types, and how can we make the world a better place?
Yeah. Life would be boring if there was only one type.
Unless they were all 8s. We're a lot of fun.
I will also say, too, on Instagram, you can find plenty of Enneagram accounts that will do just, different funny memes for your type and, different situations. And, you can see who we're following because we follow plenty of Enneagram accounts. I get a lot of fun out of those as well.
Yeah, so as serious as the Enneagram is, there's a lot of fun behind it. Like Laura said, I mean, some of these things will just tell you, how do you view a glass half full or a glass half empty? And some of these things will just make you laugh when you're sitting with your group of friends that can read through them. And you're like, yeah, that's exactly what you do.
There was one that was talking about how each type is on vacation, specifically a beach. And it was just funny to see like, oh yeah, type 1. Yep, my dad would do that. Type 2. Yep. Yeah, my mom is bringing all the snacks. Type 7. He's going to bury himself in the sand. Yep, that's my brother. And it's just so funny just to see how accurate those things are. So with all that said, we are so thankful that you joined us for episode 2. We look forward to being with you next week. Don't forget, you can follow us over on Instagram. I'm at It's Laura Stevens.
I'm at _Nate Stevens.
And you can also subscribe over on YouTube, because we're going to be putting out exclusive content that is made specifically for video content and not for audio format. So definitely be sure to subscribe over there. And if you love this podcast, please be sure to leave a review and give us a rating on whatever platform you're listening on.
We're so excited next week to dive into type 1. What does it mean to be healthy? What does it mean to be unhealthy? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? So join us next week as we continue to live a life beyond the norm.
Bye.